It can be so frustrating when you don't get a photograph in focus, especially when it's a fleeting moment. So today I'm going to show you how I set up my camera to be a focusing machine, from landscapes to sports and portraits, and also where to focus depending on what you're photographing. First of all, let's set the camera up to back button focus. This is a revolutionary way to focus, and once you get used to it, you'll be surprised at how well it works. With back button focusing, it basically takes away the focusing from this button and puts it on the back of the camera, hence the name. So when you hold your hand here, your thumb is going to be the focusing button, and then this finger is going to be taking the photograph. This gives the control back to you, so you decide when your camera focuses instead of whenever you half press that shutter button. There's nothing worse than framing up your shot, getting everything perfect, then when you go to take the shot, the focus changes to a different point or hunts around and just loses focus completely. For landscapes, once you find your framing, move the square to where you want to focus on that point and then leave it. You can take as many images as you want without the camera either changing the focus or losing it altogether. Then when you change your framing and want to focus somewhere else, press the back button again to get focus on the new thing, and once again, take as many photos as you want until the next time you want to change it. For people and portraits, back button focusing is really effective because you can keep that button pressed and it'll track them when you're in continuous autofocus. With eye autofocus on, having it set to human, setting the area to wide, and then having it in continuous autofocus, doesn't matter where that subject moves, as long as you've got the button pressed, it'll keep focusing on that person. When you take your finger off, when they move, then they'll be out of focus, but then you press it again and it'll focus back on them again. Nowadays, this is one of the most effective ways to shoot portraits. When shooting sports or fast-moving objects, when your subject is moving in the frame, if they're coming towards or away from you with the back button pressed, it will track them. And then if your subject is moving across your position on the same plane, then you can focus and let go once you know where you have to focus. Another one I personally do with back button focusing is to focus and then reframe. This is where I'll focus on something with that back button and then reframe my composition. And I seem to do this a lot when hiking. I guess because I've done this for years, I'm used to it, and it's the quickest way for me to get the shot. This has very much come from using older cameras when you just had one good focusing crosshair bang in the middle of the frame. I'll talk more about the advanced settings like real-time tracking in a bit, but first let's set up back button focusing. With my Sony a7C, the a7 III, and most of the cameras with the older menu system, go to page 5 of 14 in tab 1 and look for AF with shutter and turn this off. Then go to Custom Key on the second tab, page 9 of 10, and find Custom Key Photos, which is this top one. Set the button you want to use as AF on. I'm going to set it as this AF on button, and if you have factory settings on this camera, this will be already set to that. This actually shows how good this function is, that manufacturers have labeled this back button as autofocus on. With the Sony a7 IV and any of the camera with the new menus, go to the purple tab, AF/MF, page 21 out of 53, and find AF with shutter, and turn this off. Then go to the yellow toolbox tab on page 43 out of 53. Look for this option, Custom Key Dial Set. I've set this to the AF on button on the back. If you have your camera in the factory setting and haven't messed around with these custom settings too much, this is already set up as AF on, so you just need to do the first step. Then set the focus area on page 23 out of 53 to spot, which is the same as flexible spot in the old menus. With my a7 III, I used to have it on the press of the joystick, but if you press it and inadvertently move the joystick to one side or the other, this moved the square erratically. So it's much better to use the joystick to move the square or use the touchscreen and then press AF on to focus. Now, if you shoot with Fuji, Canon or Nikon, there will be videos to set up back button focusing for those cameras. Either search for your specific model and back button focusing, or I'll see what I can find and leave some links in the description. The thing is just to give it a go. If it doesn't work for you and your shooting style, watch this video again and change all of those settings back. But most photographers I know do use back button focusing, and it's revolutionized the way that they focus. Let me know in the comments below if you've used it or if this is new to you. The only downside is when you hand your camera to one of your friends or someone else to take a photograph of you, and you end up with blurry photographs. So to get around this, I've just memorized where that autofocus with shutter option is, and then I just change that quickly before I hand my camera to someone else. I've touched on focusing areas already, but let's dive a little bit deeper. With the wide focusing area, your camera will tend to focus on the thing that's closest to your camera, unless you've got Eye AF on, or unless there's something prominent that stands out in the frame. It's getting better as cameras become more intelligent, but again, you're giving that control to the camera instead of you deciding where to focus. Like I've already mentioned, I use wide focusing area with Eye autofocus on when I'm photographing people, because it gives them the opportunity to move around the frame and the focus will stay with them, whether they're close to the frame or really far away from the frame. The one I use most in cameras like the A7 III is flexible spot. This is perfect for landscape photography. This means I can put the focusing square where I want it and then focus on that point. This is great when you're focusing from a tripod and you want to either focus on a point that isn't in the middle of the frame, or you might want to focus stack. And if your camera has a touchscreen, even better. If you have one of the more modern cameras, you can turn on real-time tracking. It's not so good in the Sony A7 III and older cameras, but in the A7C, the A7 IV, the A7R4 and newer cameras, you can use this and it is so sticky. This is not necessary for landscapes, but if you photograph your friends and family, you might do portraits, sports or wildlife, it's absolutely fantastic. And when used with back button focusing, it just makes the whole system really efficient. You basically have 4 different modes in most cameras: single, continuous, automatic and manual. And in the Sony cameras, a setting called DMF, which I'll get onto in a bit. The first one is AFS, which might have a slightly different name depending on what brand you shoot with. This is single shot focusing. It's for static subjects that you'll focus on and then they won't move. If you're purely a landscape shooter, this is the function for you. AFC is continuous focusing. It might be called Servo AF with a different brand, but it's basically where the camera will be constantly focusing on the point you've told it to focus on. So if you or the subject are moving, it will follow that focus as long as you have that focusing square on the subject that you want to focus on. When combined with flexible spot and back button focusing, this will focus whatever you have in that square as long as you keep that button pressed. Then as soon as you take your finger off the back button, that stops focusing. So let's say you have your subject coming towards you. You would get them in the frame, press and hold the back button, and it would track them as long as they stay in that focusing square. With autofocus auto, this gives the choice to the camera to decide whether your subject is moving or static. I haven't had that much experience with it. If you have, let me know in the comments below how you've got on with it. I just find that if I'm shooting something static, I use AFS. If I'm shooting something that's moving, I use AFC. And when you use AFC in conjunction with back button focusing, you have the choice to have continuous focusing, or you press it and let go to have single shot focusing. Whilst I remember, I have the C4 button set to toggle between autofocus and manual focus. So when I want to switch to manual and make some minute adjustments, I just press this button and straight away it's in manual focus. I use manual focus when there's very little light about or when I want to make those slight adjustments. If you want to do this, again, go out and practice manually focusing your camera so you know how it works and you know where the sweet spot is for the lens you're using. As for DMF, this is when you can press the shutter button and then tune the focus in by turning the focusing dial. You just have to keep the button pressed to be able to use that focus dial. As soon as you let go of the focus button, it will stop letting you manually focus. This is good when using back button focus, but I prefer just to have a button that's set to toggle between auto and manual focus. Where you focus depends on what you're photographing. I have 2 different ways to do this, depending on whether I want everything in focus or I want one specific thing. If it's a landscape where I want everything in focus, I'll use a small aperture from f11 to f16 and focus on the furthest thing in the shot. For instance here, it's this headland that's going into the estuary. Then what I'll do is just check the foreground. So the shot that I'll take, I'll zoom in. I know that bit that I focused on is in focus. And if I come down here, it's quite dark in the foreground, but this bit is looking okay. If it's a little bit blurry in the foreground, I'll then focus on the next nearest thing. If I'm really close to the foreground, I'll focus stack, and I've done a dedicated video on that as it's a whole subject in itself. And I've left a link in the description if this is something you want to learn. On the other hand, if there's a definite subject, I'll focus on that. For this example, I've just got this bench on the side of this mountain. I'm just going to focus on that and take the shot. These are the best ways I've found to focus for me. No need to calculate hyperfocal distances or get too technical. I just focus until I know that the whole shot is in focus or that the subject is in focus. Another thing to think about is the quality of lens that you're shooting with. You have image quality, which a lot of people talk about, but you need to take into consideration your focusing speed and accuracy. And I've talked about this before, but when you buy pro quality lenses and cameras, they just make the job easier and quicker. So if you buy a pro lens, the autofocusing speed will be really fast, as well as the accuracy. Now, if any of you have used the Nifty 50 from Canon, that's the 50mm f1.8, that one is quite slow when it comes to focusing speeds. The image quality is really high, but the focusing speed is quite low. So this comes down to that ease of use once again. Like I've already said, the more you use your camera, the more you'll get to know it and become accustomed to how it works. Now, if you're looking to get a new lens but aren't sure what to get next, in this video I talk you through the process and hopefully help you make a better decision to get the right lens that'll better your photography. I'll see you next time.